Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever the heck you are, whatever the heck you're doing. I am delighted that you decided to spend some time with me today. Hey, today we're going to talk to Rand Fishkin. He's the co-founder and CEO of SparkToro. He's dedicated his professional life to helping people do better marketing through his blogging, through his videos, through his speaking, and through his book, Lost and Founder. When Rand's not working, he's likely to be in the company of his partner in marriage and mostly petty crime, author Geraldine DeRuyter. If you feed him great pasta or great whiskey, thankfully not both, he'll give you the cheat code to rank #1 on Google. And he's one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter, and his Whiteboard Fridays over at Moz were some of my favorite things and how I even learned how to spell SEO. So what's up, Rand? It's good to see you, man.
Great to be here, Phil. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for a lot of folks, I don't even know that because you guys are still in pretty private beta over at SparkToro, I don't even think they know what that is. So I'm going to set it up with it's influencer marketing, but what the heck does that mean to you guys, Rand? Why is that important and where's that going?
Sure. Yeah. We've very interesting sort of dynamic here, Phil. So influencer marketing, let's say 6 years ago, right? 2013, maybe 2012. If we were talking about influencer marketing then, we usually meant go out and find all the sources of influence, online, offline, news, media, social, et cetera, and figure out whether they influence our audience and how we can get in front of them. Maybe through advertising or through pitching, or hey, I'll email this Phil guy and see if I can get on his podcast because he reaches my audience, that kind of thing, right? That was influencer marketing 6 years ago. Today, influencer marketing basically means pay $500 to half-naked people on Instagram and they'll pose with your product. And so SparkToro does not help with influencer marketing 2019 style.
Oh, so I can't get a date? That's the only reason I signed up, Rand. I don't know,
Yeah, I'm
man.
sorry. I have bad news for you. We are not about the paid promotional
Crap.
Instagram and a little bit YouTube and maybe some Twitch that influencer marketing mostly means today. I think, very frankly, I think that's a fad. I think it's a trend that it's not going to die. It's just going to become another tactic in a marketer's arsenal as opposed to something that all these billions of dollars are going towards. So SparkToro is a startup. We, as you pointed out, have not launched yet. We're still in private beta. We're hoping to launch maybe around the end of this year, beginning of next year. And we are trying to help people with that initial problem. Find all the sources of influence that reach your audience and help you get in front of them. So we do that basically by focusing on the first part of that equation. You can type in any audience that is describable, that you can think of a way to describe, and we will go to a huge profile database that we've compiled of both social and web profiles that we kind of connect up to each other, search through the bios and the self-descriptors and the content that people use, and then analyze what the group of people that you're describing follow, read, watch, share, subscribe to, link to, visit. So you could, for example, think to make this practical, let's say you and I start a lighting design business, and I don't know anything about lighting design, but we need to reach interior decorators, right? Interior decorators, interior designers, that's our customer. I have no idea how to reach them. I don't know what they read, or maybe I've heard of Architectural Digest. Do they read that? They probably have conferences they go to. They probably have podcasts they listen to. They probably have YouTube channels they subscribe to. I don't know what they are. But SparkToro can tell me in 3 seconds flat. I can just type in interior designers and click, Los Angeles, or select United States, or we want to reach them in Canada. And SparkToro will tell me, oh yeah, 16% of the interior designers in this 700, out of these 70 million profiles, they follow this social account. They listen to this podcast. They subscribe to this YouTube channel. They visit this website. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And not only is it cool, but it's actually useful because that's the data that we're looking for, right? We're actually looking for who actually does that, not this person. Yeah, here we go, right? I think that pulled from the air is really hard. I mean, how many times can you see the same people shilling 64 different things that they don't give a crap less about?
For sure. And I really hate this mentality, right, that I think a lot of marketers have. I'm not sure how we got to this place where we essentially take the idea that just because you have lots of followers and you describe your own profile in a certain way, like you say, oh, I'm a fan of architecture. That doesn't mean that architecture students and interior designers and architects follow you. It just means you put that in your bio, right? And unfortunately, 99% of the tools out there and services and lists of most influential people, they just look for who has the most followers that also has this word in their profile. But that's not what you want. That's not what you're interested in. What you want to know is who and what do architects and interior designers actually follow? What do they read? What do they listen to? What do they watch? That is what we're trying to get at with SparkToro, as opposed to this sort of very overly simplistic and often inaccurate way of searching.
Well, it's easy to get the other way wrong because I can update my bio anytime. And I can say, you know, because remember back in the day, 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago, Rand, when I first encountered you, and I think back to those times and I think about how people would just update their bio because, oh, I want free coffee, so I'm going to put coffee in my bio.
Totally.
Or music or whatever, and people are getting free stuff, or, you know, and it's just fascinating because just because you get free stuff doesn't mean that you have any sort of influence over people. That's not influence, that's just interest. Right. And there's a huge difference, right? Like I would say, I love music, but you would not come to me for musicians to say, geez, I wonder what Phil plays on his iPhone. No, that's not how this works, right? Even if I do blip, you know, remember blip.fm, right? When we blip out a bunch of music, well, even that just means I'm a music lover, not a music influencer.
Yes, absolutely. Right. And I think, you know, I have whatever, a few 100,000 followers on Twitter. If I change my profile on Twitter, right, my bio to say travel writer, boom, all of a sudden I can get what? Free hotel stays and free trips and free vacations. That makes no sense at all, right? But unfortunately, the sophistication level is not there for marketers in travel to be able to find who their audience actually pays attention to. And so they have to use the unsophisticated method of high follower count plus keyword match equals pay this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good that SparkToro came along, man, because I really think that this totally makes sense as the next iteration to be more relevant, to have more real influence, to get more real people. Because frankly, I can tell you, I have 2 Instagram accounts. One of them, for some reason, has like 300 followers because I don't use it. But I get almost a 40% reach in that network, that little network, 120 people. Whereas my bigger account, I only have a couple thousand people. But if I reach half that many, not even percentage-wise, half that many people, it's a shock. And it's like, how does that happen? Like, why does that make any sense? And why, you know, if I were looking for influence of my own, I would post it to the other account that actually gets 120 people instead of the one that has 3,000 people that follow it.
So it's funny. I don't know if you're teasing this up intentionally, but we have this tool called Spark Score, which is free. It's just a Twitter tool for now, but we're planning on doing it for Instagram as well. And the idea behind it is exactly what you're talking about. Rather than attempting to show follower count, right, which is usually the metric that a lot of people use, we're sort of looking back at the engagement levels across posts and then basically using a relatively simplistic algorithm to predict what the reach per post is for an account, right? So essentially, rather than saying, oh, your Twitter account has 500,000 followers, we'll say your Twitter account on average per tweet reaches 4,700 people. Right? And I think that is far more interesting because what we noticed is, for example, my wife Geraldine is a very influential person on Twitter, particularly in social spheres, political spheres, and those kinds of things, and the writing world because she's an author. But her Twitter account has about a little less than a quarter of the number of followers that I have on my Twitter account. But when she posts a tweet, on average, she has 5 to 10 times the number of impressions and engagements as I do.
Wow.
So who would you rather have send your tweet? you would rather have Geraldine. If your goal is broad branding, right? If assuming your audience is not the issue, but assuming that breadth and reach is your issue, you want Geraldine's account, not Rand's account, to send that tweet. And that is invisible. It's impossible to see, right? You can't go into someone's Twitter analytics and see, hey, how many people per post did they reach and what's their impression averages over the last 30 days, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but we can build, right, a simplistic algorithm, which is what we did using a bunch of data just to try and get to that match. And I think that is a much more interesting number to use in your marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, useful, right? That's really important, right? Because that's key. I want to stop wasting money on my marketing. I want to stop wasting money on my sales, right? I want to partner up with the right people instead of just any people, which is definitely what SparkToro solves for. So Rand, let's back up though. You had, in my humble opinion, the best organization ever for SEO with Moz. I went to a couple Moz, local Moz events and was blown away by what you guys did. Every member of your team was professional and knowledgeable and willing to help, which was impressive. And then you stepped away, man. Yeah. Like, holy crap, what happened, dude?
A lot of things happened. I mean, I can talk about most of it. Some of it's a little personal and private, but or I don't know. Maybe I signed something with my board of directors. So I am still the chairman of the board for Moz, and that company continues to do, I would say, it continues to do well as a private company. As a venture-backed private company, it's not hitting what venture capitalists, venture investors would want in terms of metrics, which is primarily growth. So Moz is very slow growing at this point, less than 10% year over year. It is profitable, which is great. As of a few years ago, it turned profitable, and puts. If you and I owned the company, we'd be thrilled, right? Because it does 60 million in revenue, has 30,000 plus customers, is kicking off about 10-12% of that in cash, right? So you and I are taking home $6 million every year, right? We're
yes.
Whoa, not too shabby, right? But because it is venture backed, it's essentially kind of this stuck in the middle, I think is what you would call it. It is not it's not at death's doorstep. It's not a zombie company. It could survive and thrive, and who knows, get the growth rate up a little bit, and maybe it becomes more exciting. But it's not going to be the billion-dollar unicorn that venture investors are primarily looking for when they put. In Moz's case, I think it's the company's raised $29 million over its life. And so, yeah, it's a little tough. I was CEO. I was the founder and CEO there, co-founder actually. My mom and I started Moz initially, way back in 2003. Initially as a blog, and then it became a consulting company, and then it became a software company in 2007. I raised some venture capital, and I was CEO until 2014. And then stepped down at that time. I had a bout with depression, and I talked to my executive team and to my board, my investors, Brad and Michelle, and basically, came to the conclusion that my mental state, emotional state, really was harming the company. Right? It was not a great situation to be in, and I think I felt. On reflection, I think that I would have done things differently, but I felt at the time just trapped and so negative, right? When you're in a depressive mind state, you can't see light at the end of the tunnel. And so I stepped down as CEO in 2014, promoted my longtime chief operating officer, Sarah Bird, to the role of CEO, and she still holds that role today. She's still on as a CEO. We just had a board call yesterday, so I still participate. I stayed with the company for another almost 4 years until 2018, and stepped out of the company last year to start SparkToro, and launch my book, Lost and Founder. And that I think that experience made me realize that actually I love small startups. I really love the early stage. I love a few, very small number of people. Spark Toro is just Casey and myself and a few contractors. And I love it. My life, Phil, my life is so amazing. I am surrounded by friends and by love and by great people and a lot of support. And I'm building something that I believe in and I'm proud of. And there's not a lot of process or meetings to get anything done. I don't go into an office. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, you won't be able to see, but I'm in my shed. I call it Shed Toro. Here, I'll show those of you who have a camera, right? It's just a whiteboard and some chairs and a little garden shed out back of my house that I work from, which I love. I'm very, very happy being remote. Casey and I both work remote, and it's a good situation. So I feel very lucky. I know a lot of people who go through depression, who have anxiety like I do, aren't able to find ways to extricate themselves from professional situations that they don't want to be in or that aren't good for their mental health because they're trapped financially or by healthcare or by needs for their kids or their family. And I have deep empathy for that. I am one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So do you still suffer from any depression, Rand, or do you feel you're through that?
I feel like I'm really out the other side of it. I think even as of maybe 2017, 16, 17, it was probably a really deep 9 months to a year, and then kind of a slow extrication process. But I still obviously have neuroses and anxiety and all those kinds of things. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was asking me, well, hey, I want to go on this like crazy trip with you, and like let's do this vacation together. And I told him, man, I would really love to, but I'm not sure that I could mentally handle it. I don't think I could do that. And that was a hard thing. I think it's a tough thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around, especially if you don't suffer from it, right? It's hard to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, empathy is a big thing for that. I think, the more that we can just listen, be fully present with our friends that might suffer from that, I think the better it can be, and not try to solve, right? Just be there and hold space.
Yeah, it's really, it's great that you say that. I think during my, my worst times of depression, the people who were not as helpful as I think they wish they were the people who were just super positive, like, hey man, you got this, everything's great, you're going to be fine, look at all you've accomplished. That was not helpful at all, right? That really that made me feel worse somehow. I don't know, my mind went to this place of how do I prove to them that they're wrong. And people who said, yeah, I've been there, that sucks, you're in the deep of it, and I'm so sorry you have to slog through this. Like that was much more helpful to hang out with people who, I don't know, had that empathy and that willingness to kind of go negative with you, right?
Yeah.
Which was surprising. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but
yeah, I obviously I don't know that anything is true for everyone, but that's good advice for some. If you've tried to be super positive, then maybe perhaps just being there and being empathetic might be a better solution for you. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And obviously, a few things did help me quite a bit. Therapy, I can't recommend that enough. I think every human being should go to therapy, whether you have depression or anxiety, or you don't, or you're the healthiest person in the world. I think that the people who think I don't need therapy, they are probably the first ones who should be in line at the therapist. Or I also significantly changed my exercise, eating, sleeping habits, sleep in particular, right? Everything else is secondary. I think maybe even therapy to sleep, just consistently getting 7.5 to 8.5 hours is life altering. And that's really hard when you're depressed. I think it can feed on itself and keep you up, and it leads to a lot of insomnia, but that helped me a ton.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. That's good advice, and I'm glad you're through it, Rand. That's good news.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
Awesome, man. So let's talk about your book. Let's talk about Lost and Founder, which I think is really, really fun. I mean, the way that you write actually is one of the things that engages me the most, because you have a tongue-in-cheek yet very witty and smart, like almost British humor about your writing, and I really enjoy that. So talk about your book, Rand, Lost and Founder. What's the book about?
Yeah, the subtitle is A Painfully Honest Field Guide to the Startup World. And I think that does a nice job of describing it, because the honesty in the book is not merely telling the truth, it's trying to tell the whole truth. And that is something that rarely happens, especially in the startup world. I think because there's such an obsession and such an incentive for founders and people in that ecosystem to gloss over the ugly bits and to talk about it as though it is this incredible world of opportunity and how you can become wealthy and powerful and change the world in all these positive ways and support innovation. And I think, thankfully, I think popular culture and media and society is sort of looking with a far more skeptical eye on all things technology, all things Silicon Valley, than they were 4 or 5 years ago even, and certainly 10 years ago when Google and Facebook were these darlings of the world and they could do no wrong. I think Lost and Founder is a fundamentally very personal story, but what I try and do is, as I'm telling each personal story, I try and pull the lens out, right, the camera out, to a much wider story of the ecosystem to try and understand how this fits in, right? So here's Rand and his mom. They're in debt. They're struggling to be able to, get this thing off the ground. And then they raise venture capital. And what does that mean, right? How does that change the incentives of the company and the structure? And who is behind venture capital funds, and why are they putting money into them, and what's their goal? How come so few venture entrepreneurs understand this? Why do they issue stock options as opposed to bonuses? What is a stock option? Why should I be nervous about getting one of those? Are they worth anything or not? So all these kinds of things, right? Trying to take a practical look at both the venture side of the business, right? The company building, and then also a lot of the marketing stuff, right? Why did Moz become such a big success in its early days? Why was it growing 100% year over year for 8 years in a row? How did it become a sort of a leader in the SEO field so early on, right? Kind of, it became the big SEO software company before we had people like SEMrush and Ahrefs and some of these others that have come into the space and done extraordinarily well, obviously. And I think that reverse engineering that from the inside, being able to take an insider perspective, is really unusual, especially when the company didn't become the billion-dollar unicorn, right? I think what you usually get when you read a book like that talks about the experience of a founder is an amazing success story that tells you, here's all the things we did right and here's what you should do. And that is not Lost and Founder. That is not what I tried to do at all, right? This is a warts and all story. This is here are the dumb mistakes we did. Here are the places we got lucky. Here are the smart things that I would repeat that I plan to do again with my next company. Here's the things I will never do again. Because they don't make sense. And I think that's much more honest. If you've spent time with even extraordinary founders who've built incredible, businesses that have generated billions of dollars of wealth, they have also made these mistakes, but that's not what they talk about, right? That's not what they're asked about. They get on a podcast with you and that's not what they're interviewed about. So this is a different kind of story.
Yeah, definitely. Did you send Adam Newman a copy of your book? Because I think he probably could have used it before he started WeWork. No?
I believe Adam has a unique philosophy that if something does not bring him we-ness and help him crush it, it's not in his worldview. So
yeah. Yeah, I think that's because he's a wiener. I think that's really why, Rand.
He is a very unique human being. I mean, I think that he's a great example of what happens when you have a tremendous amount of confidence and belief that, you know, whatever you're thinking is the most magical, amazing thing in the world. And then everyone around you always reinforces it for a decade, right? And you can do no wrong, and you are surrounded by yes, and you are surrounded by wealth and power and influence and worship. And I think that gets dangerous, right? If you don't have people to call you on your BS, whew,
yeah,
you can quickly turn that way too. You know, Adam is obviously a phenomenally wealthy, influential, powerful, well-connected person, and I wouldn't trade my life for his for anything. No way.
No, I agree. I hope everything works out, man. Because that's, after hearing yes for so long, that's got to be super stressful. What's going on with WeWork, and wish him all the best.
I hope it brings him a degree of humility and reflection that can, you know, sort of help him become more of a normal person. I have some friends who know him more closely, and I think even his friends would say, "Oh yeah, he is one weird guy."
Yeah.
Spending time with him is a strange experience, and yeah, maybe this will help him reflect on that.
Yeah, I hope so. Wish him all the best for sure on what's going on with WeWork and all of that. So, Rand, I got to ask, man, where'd you get those glasses?
Where did I get these glasses? So I used to live on Capitol Hill in Seattle. In fact, until about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. And there was this place on the hill called II that offered me a free eye exam. So I went in and my insurance paid for these lovely glasses. So it's been great. What about you?
So I got mine at Optic Soho in South Tampa.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah.
So are yours metal or plastic?
They are metal, yeah. So they kind of have this, piece.
Awesome. Yeah, mine are metal except for the bows. The bows are plastic because they're not metal. So yeah.
Yeah, thankfully they're very light.
Yes,
with
absolutely.
Metal glasses that can be heavy, and these are not.
Yeah, so they're not made of steel.
No, I don't know what the material is. I assume it's
I'm just teasing.
some kind of coated aluminum. I don't know.
Yeah, or titanium, perhaps.
Yeah,
because titanium is pretty strong. Because if it was aluminum, it probably wouldn't hold its shape. So if you've had them for any period of time,
good point.
Likely it's titanium or something, or some titanium alloy, I would guess. I love glasses, but I'm by no means an optometrist or someone who knows enough to be dangerous.
I love the idea that I have something bionic on my face. A little bit of Wolverine in there.
There you go.
That's it. To make up for the fact that I really have no body strength at all. I was made for sitting in front of a computer. That's
it. That's funny, man. That's funny. So cool. Well, let's wrap up here and talk a little bit more about SparkToro here for folks that are interested in that, in real, I would call it real influencer marketing, real influencer selling, real influencer research, not just 2 points that are completely unrelated to each other, which is just bio and number of followers. So if people are thinking, because SparkToro won't be out probably for another quarter, a couple months probably. Yep. If they're looking to think about how might I use this in my business, can you give us some some thoughts, or if you even have an early case study, please, Rand?
Sure. Yeah, a lot. So about 350 people have been using it so far. Many of them fall into one of three major categories. So sort of entrepreneurs and founders of small businesses or startups, marketers who are at agencies, usually small to mid-size agencies, who help their clients to identify their audiences and figure out their marketing strategy and determine, where are we going to buy ads and where are we going to do pitches and how are we going to grow our search traffic and how are we going to grow our social traffic and all those kinds of things. And then in-house marketers who do the same thing, but they work for a company. And we've had some exciting uses of all three. So in the latter category, we have had a number of folks who basically use SparkToro to figure out where they should allocate budget for their advertising and branding campaigns. So basically, hey, we have an accounting software company. Where can we reach accountants and chief financial officers of small businesses and heads of finance? Because we're trying to pitch this, we're trying to make them aware of us. So give me a list. Yeah, I want to know the YouTube channels they subscribe to. And then they kind of play it two ways, right? One, I can advertise on those, but two, I can also see if we know someone who's connected to the host. And if we do, we can talk about something more like a promotion during the show by the host, or getting a guest spot, or being used live in a demo, those kinds of things. And then obviously for the agency folks, a lot of them are using it to build these pitches and presentations to their clients saying, hey, instead of the spend you were thinking about, which was to these platforms, publishers, places, what if we diverted it to these, right? And then they show examples of, hey, our audience, the people we're trying to reach, this % of them pay attention to this source. So if we could get on this website, this podcast, if we could be amplified by these people on Twitter, and this person on LinkedIn, and these people on Instagram, and this person on, whatever it is,
TikTok.
Yeah, well, Facebook groups is the big one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Folks, right. So those kinds of insights are huge, and they can essentially just take a screenshot and show them. We also have a tab in the tool called Audience Intelligence, and that is essentially just showing characteristics about an audience. So a lot of folks have been using that as well, basically taking screenshots showing these are the words and phrases that our audience uses to describe themselves. Let's start making some content that serves those groups, as opposed to just creating content for our customers. And also, let's go use those descriptors to identify whether we have affinities in other places with our audience that we could potentially reach them. So it's a lot on that strategic side and on the tactical side of where to put dollars and effort. And then the entrepreneurs and founders, I do have I have a recent case study. So some friends of mine here in Seattle have been using the tool for their startup, which is in the it's a little bit like Yelp, but primarily for contractors, people who might do work on your house, or who might do help you with services around your neighborhood. And they have this unique innovation that they essentially build it through your network. So you basically, I go in and I recommend the people that I use as a plumber and an electrician and a contractor and an HVAC installer, a roofing person, a siding person, a painter, our gardener, whatever, right? All that kind of stuff I put on my profile, and then everyone I'm connected to can see, oh, Rand recommends these people, which is essentially what we all do, right? When we're, hey, Phil, do you know a good gardener in Tampa? And you're like, yeah, I know a guy, or my friend knows a guy. Great, right? And so it's essentially trying to create that platform. So they've been using SparkToro because they essentially have been putting out some content pieces, and every time they put out a content piece that targets a new audience, they figure out who does that audience pay attention to, and then they reach out through their network, they're pretty well networked, and they find someone who knows that person, get connected over email, have a call, basically pitch them this idea. It's called Fresh Chalk, and then ask them, hey, we're pushing this piece. Would you be interested in reviewing it? Would you help us promote it? And the answer is almost always yes. And so, they have been doing very well. They haven't been putting out that much content, but every time they put out a piece, it's thousands, tens of thousands of visitors and exactly the people they want. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Not too shabby. So that's been really cool. I'm excited to see more content marketing functions for SparkToro. It's a very tactical use of the data, but a really cool one.
Yeah, and definitely one that allows to pinpoint with near perfect accuracy who our audience truly is and who they're influenced by, which is super important.
If you know your audience, I think this is the most challenging thing with SparkToro. There are some people who basically say to us, well, our audience is people who buy this was one of my beta testers recently, our audience are people who buy mortgage insurance. And my answer is, oh, crap, well, everybody buys mortgage insurance.
Right, yeah, that doesn't narrow anything down.
No, that's like everyone who buys a house, right? And so they say, well, can you help us reach those people? And the answer is, I really can't. I can't because they're not a describable group, right? They're not interior designers. They don't put in their bio, I am looking for mortgage insurance right now, right? You could conceivably put in, well, so what we talked about was, we know that people who buy mortgage insurance are also usually home buyers, right? That's the time when you're looking for it. You're usually not thinking of switching your mortgage insurance unless you're doing a refinance or whatever, but you're buying a house. So what do people who are buying houses follow? Zillow, Redfin, right? Realtor.com. Okay, we plug in those websites and we see what those, people who, we sort of have a search that's like, my audience visits the website Zillow.com search, right? And then we can show you, okay, people who visited Zillow or shared Zillow or linked to Zillow, they also paid attention to blah, 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 right? These podcasts, these YouTube channels. So now you can go market to those places as well. So if you're spending a lot of money as a mortgage insurance specialist on Zillow's advertising, here's some other options. Here's some places where you could look, not just on the paid side, but on the organic side as well. And that seemed to be reasonably effective, but you have to get creative if you don't have a describable way with your audience.
Yeah, and does your audience have to be like hyperactive on the social, or can they be kind of passive?
No, not necessarily, because essentially what we do, it's kind of like election polling, right? So, in an election, right, like when 538 publishes polls about, which people support which Democratic primary candidate in Iowa or what have you, they don't need to survey everyone in the whole state. They can just look at, a statistically significant sample size. So they can say, hey, we know if we survey 1,500 people and these are the percents we get back for support for whatever it is, Biden versus Warren versus Sanders, et cetera, we know with X percent accuracy, 2% accuracy, 5% accuracy, right, in the bounded range, how the voting is going to go, right? And that science is pretty darn good. We use the same thing at SparkToro. We don't need to know what every interior designer is doing, right? As long as we can identify a few thousand of them who are active on social, we're good. So if your audience is very non-active on social, a good example of one of our beta testers is in the B&B space, not Airbnb, but actual bed and breakfast, right? Like gay couple in Vermont who owns a beautiful house and they rent it out, right? That kind of bed and breakfast. That group of people tends to call themselves innkeepers. So they have like the Innkeepers Association, Innkeeper Society, et cetera, et cetera. When you search for innkeepers on SparkToro, we don't have many profiles, but the ones that we have a very homogeneous profile. Like they all follow the same kinds of sources. They all read the same stuff. They all link to the same stuff. They all, follow the same YouTube channels, et cetera, et cetera. And so we can, with pretty statistically significant responses, say, hey, even based on this small sample set of 900 or so profiles, we've got some real good data for you. There may be 90,000 innkeepers, but as long as we've got this good sample size, we can give good data. It's kind of cool to see.
Awesome. Awesomely cool to see. So folks, if you're thinking about getting started with this, make sure you get your audience dialed in, think about what they do, what they need, so that you can boil the ocean down into a couple small puddles so you can actually find some good stuff. So Rand, I want to say thanks for joining. This is awesome. It's great to talk to you. Great to get to know you a bit. So thank you for that. So really cool,
My
man.
pleasure, Phil. No, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And secondly, if people want to get to know you more, if they want to find out more of your goodness, obviously they can go to sparktoro.com. But where on the socials are you most responsive, or do you most enjoy?
I am most active on Twitter, and I will say I try and get to all of the replies that I get there, but depending on the day, sometimes it's overwhelming and I can't. But certainly I'm always available via email. I'm pretty fast there, rand@sparktoro.com. And yeah, if you're interested in the beta, you can sign up for that on SparkToro's site. We have a few thousand folks in line already, but we're gonna hopefully be opening that up more broadly in the next few months.
Awesome. So folks, Rand gave you his email, rand@sparktoro.com. That's RAND@SPARKTORO.com. Rand, it was a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. And hopefully next time I go to Seattle, we can grab a cup of coffee.
That sounds lovely.
Awesome. Thank you, Rand. Have a great day. And thanks everyone for listening, tuning in, watching, and whatever you did, whatever you are, make it happen. Have a great day. Thanks.
All right, great.